Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Brett Smith is a former population health management and risk management executive turned health coach, author, and health activist. One day, a family member who had been achieving amazing results on a low carbohydrate diet piqued Brett's curiosity. He had spent over 20 years in the health insurance, corporate wellness, disease management, and pharma industries and had never heard the words low carb or keto. Always loving a good mystery, he put on his detective hat and started down the rabbit hole. Eventually, he started his channel, My Metabolic Life, which focuses on the relationship between how our metabolism impacts our health. His focus is to explore the culprit to most of what ails us, which is mitochondrial dysfunction. This not only includes the chronic diseases that hardly existed 100 years ago, but also most of our mental health and neurological conditions. He has also recently started the channel called Metabochondriacs, Brett Smith and Dr. Ryan Cooley, Awakening and Healing with Metabolic Therapy. They will be sharing topics regarding how our metabolic health dictates much of what is happening in our physical and mental health. Brett Smith, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Casey, thank you so much. I'm very happy and humbled to be here.
Well, it's an honor to host you. You mentioned that you had kind of just found our channel after I reached out to you, and it's kind of fun when you find a channel and there's all this like content, and we've done, oh my goodness, like over 600 episodes. Imagine how I felt a week or two ago when I came across the work of Dave Mack. I had no idea who this guy is. And all of a sudden, I find this amazing show where he's hosting all these people, like 20 people a week on his show at sometimes, and it's just this like treasure chest of amazing stories. And I got to meet you and your amazing story and Dr. Ryan Cooley, who's going to be on in a few weeks. And I'm like so jazzed that now I've got like all this content to get through. He's doing amazing work, and your interview on his show is absolutely wonderful. It was a great episode.
Dave is a machine on the amount of content that he can put out, and we all have our own individual taste for what we are looking for in content as a consumer of content. But as somebody who now is trying to emulate his success, your success, and others, his ability to just say, "So, Brett, how did you find carnivore?" and then not talk for 25 minutes if the person has that much story is really amazing. And it's awakening so many people because people can go to people like a Dr. Cooley, who we can all look at as a legitimate expert, has medical degrees and all of these things. But you hear a couple hundred stories of people who lose hundreds of pounds, reverse their diabetes, reverse their cancer, reverse their arthritis, and all these things, and hear the transformations that happen, and they'll get emotional. I can get emotional, and I'm going to kill that right now because I hate it. But it touches people, and it's making a movement happen. And whether you just want to individually impact those around you, or you're looking to be more of a worldwide activist and change fundamentally how all this works from the ground floor up, it's just impactful. So Dave is amazing. Low Carb Life is amazing. I've now dived into your channel. So many of my healthcare heroes you've already found and gotten to, and now you're one of them also. So let me shut up and let you get into what you want to talk about.
Well, we're just dudes, and we like to stuff our emotions as deep down as possible. And I wasn't planning on this either, but bring Nina on the show, and my voice cracks, and I start crying on air, introducing somebody who completely changed my life. And so these people are very special. And you're right, there is something really powerful to hear all these stories out there. And your story is absolutely a wonderful one as well. Being in the health industry for so long, and as we mentioned, somebody in your family got great results. You'd never heard of any of this stuff. Can you tell us what that was like?
Just mind blowing is really, I hadn't seen my brother in 4 months, and all of a sudden he's somewhere in the 35 to 40 pound lighter scenario. And I was really big at that point in time. And I'm like, "What'd you do?" And he goes, "I did this low carb keto thing." We kept it going on with the birthday celebration of the night. I went to play an athletic event. I used to be a college tennis player. I've still been a nationally ranked platform tennis player and other different types of things. And I went to play one of those big tournaments in Chicago with one of my old college tennis teammates. And I came back and it was incredibly humbling because for years I considered myself functionally fat. and that I was still able to hang and get it all done, even though it resulted in 4 meniscus surgeries from carrying that weight around the court for all those years. But I was just so thoroughly disgusted with my level of play at that national tournament in Chicago that I came back and I had to try to figure out what this was. So he had very little to give me. So I just kind of tried to figure it out on my own. Couple of things that first caught my first blush is people are talking about LDL in I'll call it a situational standpoint. The people who know what they're talking about are like, it might not be the boogeyman that we've all heard that it is. That caught me off guard. People are talking about saturated fat being actually good for you. And I'm like, in that world you described, the population health management, which is really two different worlds. It's both the corporate wellness and the corporate disease management. Usually in the fully insured health insurance world, those are all tied into the health insurance program. When employers get larger and they self-fund, they now pick these different pieces from different vendors, try to go best in class type stuff. And so I'm used to selling the disease management guidelines. I understand what they are. I was never a practicing health coach, but at our company, when we sold, we'd go out and screen 3,000 people, health risk assessment. Here's what you say you had. Here's what we believe you have that you don't know about yet. And then we start working and coaching them. Our coaches had to go through a coach certification program, which was also taught at University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, but was created by the doctor who created the predictive modeling algorithms of our program. So because I would always be filling out these called health requests for proposals. So my job was to go to all the major insurance brokerage and consulting houses across the country. Most of them have an MD on staff who's their chief medical officer, who makes sure that what they're recommending passes mustard for what's going on in the medical world. And so on top of having some pharma background, working for a doctor here for 10 years and with a doctors much of my professional life, I, just very comfortable in that world. But I suddenly got freaked and spooked because I'm like, he's going to be a skinny guy in a casket, because it's against some of the basic mainstream medical, call them narratives now, I'll use that word better, than conventional wisdom. And I got spooked, and I didn't want him to have negative ramifications. So I go, well, I'm used to selling pharma. I'm used to selling these predictive modeling algorithms. I had to crack open the algorithm, show them, here's how we did the synthesis and analysis, the regression analysis to weigh all the individual pieces. So as data changes, as studies change, new data is available, we can adjust in real time the algorithm. So I'm pretty good with what is evidence-based medicine, what is, the hierarchy of the scientific method and all of these different things. So I go, I'll just go find the definitive studies that show this is really not a good thing that you're doing. It might be a fad diet. Fast forward a couple dozens of hours of going down that rabbit hole, and I start realizing that, oh my God, he's not doing a fad diet. All he's doing is eating in a way consistent with, whether you want to say since the creation of humanity or the evolution of humanity, but this is just consistent with our whole background. And it's the new things that we now call commonly, that we refer to as food. 90% of what's in the grocery store that I now call food-like substances, that as we have been exposing ourselves, and it's just become commonplace that, one day Pop-Tarts didn't exist, and suddenly them and Carnation instant breakfast drinks became a normal part of my preschool, before going to school habit. It was quick, it was easy. I could jump out of the shower, do that in 45 seconds, head out the door, go to school. But my great grandmother would have never recognized those things as food, and they have ramifications to it. So I had this big epiphany that, oh my God, he actually stumbled onto something, and he was teaching me what's going on instead of me coming back and trying to find the definitive study to show him stuff. And so it was kind of early mid-December, as that's 2018, as that started sinking in with me. And I started applying what I was learning. I started cutting out the crap. I started cutting out more of the grains and things. There's reasons for all that. And but I knew that 1/1 was coming, and it's New Year's resolution. It's the time to just really buckle down. And I had left the disease that population health management world 4 years earlier for a couple of different reasons that we won't go into now, but a couple of them that are good for this story to understand is having been since 1988 in the health insurance and uh, we'll just call it all aspects of employee benefits and corporate wellness, the property casualty and how workers' comp works into all of this, also health related. I um I really need I just had a big background with all of this. And at 2014, when I left there and left the industry, part of it was because, well, the biggest reasons I can't go into and I won't go into because it's just not relevant here. But the second and third most relevant reasons why I didn't go back into the employee benefits world and another corporate wellness company is I'm like, we're not making enough impact. This is not changing the trajectory of where we're going with our healthcare costs. In 88, when I worked for Cigna Health Insurance, the first employee group health program and the first two I sold, both one to a savings loan, one to a bank, $130 was the full family monthly premium, and $35 was the single premium. Employers back in 88 and 87 were freaking out at that. And now it's like $800 to $1,000 for single coverage, $1,500 to $2,000 for or more for family. And I was just like, we are going to be headed towards socialized medicine because nothing that we're doing is changing the trajectory of what's going on. And where I was in my earlier 50s at that point in time, I'm just like, I don't want to go jump into an industry that's going to become a dinosaur and going to be gone and buggy whipped and then have to be in my late 50s, early 60s and reinvent myself to go do something else. So I went and did other things at that point in time. And it wasn't until then that really sibling birthday party and then doing this deep dive where I'm like, oh my God, now I'm starting to look like I belong in the corporate wellness business again, jumped back in and, and then 2 years later made a change into the cardiac world based on a test that I found. But I'll just kind of leave it there as far as my early awakening, what helped me. And if you want to steer me in other directions, because you know the story.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. I did have some questions specifically about insurance.
Yeah.
And so we can just kind of ask you what your experience was. You can't really speak for the industry or whatever, but just curious. You hear a lot of kind of stories out there about, it's a scammy industry or the metrics they were using, for example. Like as you look back at the things that you were using as metrics to set the algorithms for I'm assuming how much somebody would pay for their premium. Were they using correct metrics in hindsight, like looking back, or would you have changed the way they approached that?
Okay. Interesting question. And in over the last 2 years, my favorite reply or starting of almost any answer to anything is there's a lot of nuance and context that comes into play with all of this. So, from a health insurance, purely an individual health or a group health standpoint, those are all based on actuarial tables. So actuaries are looking at what's going on with the health of the world and then segments it into age appropriate, gender appropriate, number of people in the family. And then that's how we create individual health insurance rates. And it's representative of the exposure that the insurance company is taking on. So I'm not going to throw, and it's a reality. I'll circle back into why it's not ever been fixed and why it's wrong, because that's a different question. Then in the kind of the smaller, the 2, 3, 4 employee group up to the 50 to 100 employee group, that's what we call the fully insured marketplace. Again, they're going to get a demographic, a census file of here's how many people we have that are of this age, of this family or single status, and then there might be some general, how many big claims did they have, so we know how sick that the group is. And again, it's going to be predicated on trying not to lose too much money in the first year. And if so, rates will go up over the next couple years, and they're always going to go up because health inflation runs anywhere from 5 to 12% for most groups, most years. So much over the CPI and everything that goes on with all of that. Then there's a third world, which was the world that I predominantly lived in, and from a population health standpoint, where they're separating it all out. So the employer knows what their claims are. Their claims are their claims. They said instead of having to give a 3%, 4%, 5% profit margin to the insurance company, we're just going to either hire the insurance company only to process the claims, or what's called a TPA, a third-party administrator, who's going to process the claims. And then we'll piece together different other elements like, oh, I'm going to have this wellness vendor because I like their strategy. They've got something new and fresh. We're going to use this disease management company for our current chronically ill people who are never going to get better and just cost us more and more and more. And that's really where the problem comes in, because that ties back to, do you want me to expand onto it and circle back around to what is the problem with that whole model? Why
I
that
think
doesn't work?
yeah, I think it's fascinating. The health insurance model has priced me out years ago. Since we started our own business and left the corporation we cannot afford health insurance, which is awkward, and we have to do alternate things, but it's too expensive for us. So yes, if you don't mind, I think this is fascinating to learn a little bit about the system and why it's set up the way it is and how it fails.
And it, again, just like when I said my brother blew my mind because he had said, I've been doing this low carb keto thing. And I'm just like, since 1987, I've been in all different facets of the health insurance, pharma, corporate wellness, disease management. I was an insurance broker helping employers like yourself and others buy. And so I'd go out and shop them. So I've been in almost every facet of all of this. And my mind was so blown because he threw two phrases, two words, keto, low carb at me. And it never, ever came up in my 30 plus year history. I go, huh. Which is why it made it so easy for me to think it's a fad diet. I've never heard of this. Oh my God, so until I really wanted to figure it out because I was so disgusted with myself. But anyhow, so then I sit here and I now, knowing what I know now, and I reflect back on my 10 years just working for this one first population health management company where we sold the tools for health and for TPAs, health systems, and everybody to administer their own corporate wellness programs for them and resell them under their name, or we would sell them under our name. But I lived in this world, and while focusing on and reading all of the relevant health journals and population health management things and paying attention to every guru that's out there and all of the current insurance brokers and consultants, they're focused on, just like you heard me say, there's actuarial data based on existing claims. And everybody just takes for granted that things are going to just keep going up, 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 and up. And there's no other opportunity to understand, well, why did it go from a $30 single premium to an $800 single premium in one person's career? Because it's utterly insane when if you step back and just say, what's going on? Because there's this thing that we'll call the elephant in the room that nobody is paying attention to. And, we think it comes down to, well, Brett, you put on weight. Just walk another mile, eat an apple, lower your calories. And we think we're addressing the wellness aspect to it. Nobody understands that the elephant in the room is one, that's terrible advice, because when you understand the elephant in the room, which is metabolic health, and that, people went from being on an average of 0 to 1 prescriptions by the time they're 40 to 50 to they're on 4 to 5 of them now, and the 50 and 60 and 70-year-olds are on 8, 9, or 10 of them. And we've created this illusion and story. And I'll just say, as a society, there's definitely industries we can throw under the bus that are navigating much of this, because it's just this is the most profitable money-making model that's ever existed in all of mankind. About in between 22 to 24% of our country's GDP is healthcare. That doesn't include the food industry on top of it, but it does include the pharma aspect. But, so where we talk about the food-like substances that we now believe are food, and that it just creates this insulin resistance, this metabolic damage to our body, and that this is just, now we've equated metabolic damage to saying, you know what, Casey? You just get older. You feel worse when you get older. It's just part of getting older. And I now realize with my own N=1 experience that when I 6 years, well, it is really funny because the first question everybody always says, and I'm sorry, I'm bringing a couple different points and stories into one thing, but it's all relevant to the elephant in the room here. When everybody hears and witnessed that I lost 115 pounds in 9 months, the first question is, oh, what kind of cancer did you have? Because they thought you had to be the sickest person in the world to actually do that. No, I nothing. And then they're like, well, then how did you do this? And it takes a while to kind of put your elevator speech together to boil it all down. Now I just say, here's my website, go look at it. I'll answer questions if you got any. But the thing is that everybody's like, you just must feel so much better with all that weight off of you. And this will be, again, a mind-blowing thing for people who haven't gone through this already, for your casual listener that's just stumbling upon this early in their potential metabolic health journey. The thing that they just looked at me so like I'm insane, because it makes no sense to them when I would give them the following answer. I go, well, the funny thing is, yes, I was in a lot of pain when I had the 115 pounds on me, more than I have now. But then I would say, but the interesting thing is, it was only 2 to 3 weeks into that journey when I was only down about 12 pounds, 15 pounds, that I felt like I was suddenly 22 years ago or 22 years old again, with still 100 pounds left to go. Suddenly, I'm able to move around the court. I'm no longer having issues just walking up hills, climbing stairs. Stairs were always my kryptonite, because, 4 knee surgeries and just all of the chronic pain that comes from the arthritis of having your joints whittled down, and all that cartilage, meniscus, being less and less and less inside of you. It all comes with a price tag that I didn't realize at that time. But so to be able to say, I felt great even with 100 pounds on me. I don't really feel any different. I move better because I have less weight to move around. But the guys who's played with me on the court every week, they could even see that when I still had 80, 90, 70 more pounds on me, suddenly I'm getting to things, I'm moving. Or I had just started developing, the first time in my life, the year and a half before that, tennis elbow. And I had to wear, because everybody goes and buys the brace when you have that. And you realize, no, that's just inflammation that, we're calling aging and all this different other stuff. And it instantaneously evaporated and disappeared. So once you start flipping your metabolism, the elephant in the room, nobody understands in the whole health insurance world, in the whole corporate wellness world, that there's 2 metabolisms. There's the one you're born in, fat adapted, that most of our ancestors until the last 100 years, especially the last 40, 50 years, most predominantly, they all lived in it because there wasn't an opportunity for them to jump out of it. They didn't have, they might have had a Coca-Cola or a lemonade at somebody's birthday party 4 or 5 times a year. But, we used to we used to be hunter gatherers. We used to farm. And even when we moved into cities and everything like this, nobody, 98% of the population didn't have the discretionary income to be drinking Coca-Cola, to buy chocolate. Hostess didn't exist. Kellogg's just kind of came in with the Industrial Revolution. There's a whole story I know you're well aware of what happened with it. And, so there's major religious overtones that blow people's mind when you understand and you start, like you said, putting on your detective cap. And I just happened to be incredibly fortunate early on. I found Gary Taubes early on, who's like the ultimate Sherlock Holmes sleuth as far as understanding what's going on with us. At the same time, I found Nina Teicholz and the Big Fat Surprise. And here's two of their books right next to each other on the bookshelf, right next to me, among others. My biggest mistake was 40 or 50 of the first books I bought as Kindles. So they're on my computer and on my phone, but I can't just hand it to somebody to
Yeah.
share and say, check this out. So, once you understand this is really an insulin resistance problem, and insulin resistance is in some ways it's an insulin problem. There's other things, and that's what my last 2 years of what you could say jumping down the rabbit holes took me to, because I was in 2000, 2001, excuse me, I started kind of taking a guide that I wrote in 2019 and then shared with my co-host on one of my podcasts, Dr. Ryan Cooley. And he made modifications to that guide. And the funny thing is he stripped out because mine is like a research paper or a college paper that, you have to source all of your resources, So here are the 15 books I read. Here are the 60 YouTube videos that I think you will find. Here's the websites that share all this information. And so I have all of this documented. I give it to him. He strips all of that out, changes things, because he was much more what you would call plant-based, if you remember me telling the story, and vegan, vegetarian. And now we almost eat virtually exactly the same. But, so that evolution over the last 5 years, once he kind of had his awakening, it all changed. But the thing is that, so in the last 2 years, I realized that our dietary piece of it isn't the whole story. For a lot of people, if they just fix not spiking their glucose, not spiking as a result their insulin, going from being completely insulin resistant to insulin sensitive, and they can even stay on the sugar burner side. They don't have to fully flip the metabolism, and they can probably do really well with that. I'm still going to recommend everybody flip the metabolism, put the real work in the first 2 months. It might be only 2 weeks, just like with me, where I said, oh, 3 weeks, I flipped it. And I just felt great because I'm now living and understanding what the ketones and the anti-inflammatory inflammation that comes with all of that is. But there are so many ways that we actually create insulin resistance through the terrain, the environment we live in. And excuse me, there was a cardiologist you had recently who left kind of standard cardiology and is doing more of the holistic side of everything. And he was covering it so beautifully that, the terrain that we're living in, whether it's the light environment that we have, and we've now been told, get rid of these incandescent lights that don't have UVB in them and replace them with LED. So now, until you turn off your lights at night, your brain and the photosensors in your eye tell your brain it's still 2:30 in the afternoon, because that's when UVB disappears during how we evolved, how we lived forever and ever and ever. It's, so just even in the last 15 years, we've started making that, along with all of we're talking through a screen right now at each other. We all have phones that we deal with and everything. We all have all these other devices that are shooting blue. So my phone, I've stripped out all the blue light out of it. There's apps you can buy to take the blue light out of the computer screens. Instead of watching Netflix at night, if you're going to watch Netflix at night, get some blue blocking glasses so you're not being exposed to all of that, because all of this is going to change when you're releasing your melatonin from your pineal gland in your brain. And instead of doing it when it's supposed to happen around 12:30 at night, give or take, but you're messing with your whole circadian rhythm. You're not going to get through all of the sleep cycles. And in pharma, my lead drug was Ambien. So I had a bit of
Wow.
exposure with understanding what's we're trying to create from a circadian standpoint. But going down those rabbit holes and really spending another 1,000, 1,500 hours the last 2 years with understanding all the relationships to what circadian biology does and all the different ways we're destroying our sleep, where the quickest way to become insulin resistant, even if you're back fat adapted, have a bad night or two in a row of sleep, and you'll be back to being insulin resistant just like this. And so I've got people reaching out to me like, geez, Brett, I've been carnivore for like 8 months now, and it's helped so many things, but I can't fix my sleep. And so it's a matter of now going down all these other rabbit holes to figure out. And just like the cardiologist said, mold is such a big thing and can impact so many different. So there's still a jigsaw puzzle to be solved for a lot of people, because it's not only the food environment that's destroying them. But anyhow, to try to put a bow on that. So yes, from a health insurance standpoint, the nuts and bolts of actuarial science hold true, but it's not using the understanding or the imagination of understanding that, well, this diabetic doesn't have to be a diabetic. This person, with this chronic, the person on dialysis doesn't have to be 1,200,000 a year claim. They can improve what's called their EGFR, which is their kidney function, and bring that back up to where they no longer have to be on dialysis. Or the person who's rapidly moving from 100 EGFR, they're at 50 now. 3 years from now, it's forecasted, a nephrologist is telling them they're going to be at 15 and you're going to need to be on dialysis. They can go back to a 60, 70, 80 and never have to worry about dialysis being a part of their future. And as you understand all of these things, we just have to fix individuals, give them proper knowledge, give them proper education. You can eat pretty much what we used to eat historically. I think there's a seasonality to all of this and actually, if the food's being grown a couple thousand miles at different latitudes from where you are, we never, all of us predominantly, at least based on latitude up north, let's say most of North America, most of Europe and these places, we're quasi heavy paleo to carnivore for 6, 7 months outside of the growing season. We had root cellars, we would ferment foods, we'd can them to keep them kind of have something to eat. But, it was the hunting and we became masters of livestock and all of these different things that we did that were the cornerstone of our nutrition. The vegetation was supplemental on top of those things. And there's some great, I'm not anti-pharma. I was part of pharma. And I think most of the people in healthcare, most of the people in pharma, they're just people trying to do their job. And they just haven't yet understood that maybe there's more medicinal and acute aspects of healthcare that require a lot of these things. But thinking you need to go on a drug and there are people who need to be on drugs. Again, I'll say things that I know are directionally correct. But again, where I come back to, there's nuance and context that need to be applied to all of this, because not everybody is the same. I wasn't on medications when I figured this out or started to figure this out. And the evolution just of the last 5 years, even after dropping all my weight, the knowledge base is so radically, not only do I not recognize myself looking in a mirror from the 20 years prior, 25 years prior, a lot of my friends don't know me personality-wise anymore. I don't recognize myself personality-wise anymore, because where I used to be just like most people, we spend our downtime. Well, I follow the Bucks, I follow the Brewers, I follow the Packers, I follow the Badgers, I follow Marquette. And unless I'm going to a party that a friend's having, where it's a Super Bowl party or a playoff party or whatever, I don't want my teams that I grew up loving to not do well. I just really don't care, because I'd rather keep going down this rabbit hole, learning more and more and more, because it just gives me that ability to help other people. It fixed people. They never knew it was possible, because we created this narrative. You get older, you're going to be on medications. There's nothing you can do about it. And it's not true at all. You probably heard the story of my 70-year-old female client who met her just mid-May, struck up a conversation over her buying Gatorade. And I'm like, not good stuff. I pulled out my before and after picture. And she goes, last year also, I lost 120 pounds. And I go, that's amazing. She goes, yeah, I was on this Wegovy thing, and I'm like, well, that's an awesome thing. She goes, but then I went and stopped working 8 months ago. So I went off of it. I put 20 pounds on in a couple of weeks. I had to go back on it just so I wouldn't keep regaining it all. And I'm just like, well, did you know that that's called a GLP-1 agonist, and that it's the diet you were eating, because of it, you weren't creating the GLP-1 that your body does naturally. If you just change how you eat, you'll create all the GLP-1 you want. And that caught her so off guard, but it was one of those just perfect moments. If I had found her and had that same conversation with her, because she didn't know what a GLP-1 was, she didn't understand any of this. She was just a person who was suffering with 20 years of rheumatoid arthritis. She was buying canes to be able to walk. She was a little hunched over. And her life from a health standpoint and pain standpoint was just completely miserable. I said, well, if you want to figure this out, let's go to Costco. Let's do a shopping. I'll teach you how to read the labels. We'll go through all of this. Called her back 2 days later, said, how's it going? Because another thing I want to circle back to at the end of this little snippet, it's really critical for people, because I started off saying, well, I wasn't on medications when I started all of this. And for people who are on certain kinds and types of medications, they shouldn't just do this without understanding everything that's going on. And just in 1 minute, I'll finish up her story, and it'll set the table for exactly why. So with this, she goes, oh, well, I still had all my old food in the house. I'm not going to, in a week or two, I'll start this. And I'm like, I think you're being very penny wise. I'm frugal too. I don't want to throw anything away. I get it. But you're being pound foolish with your health here, because this is about healing the body. The weight loss is just a side effect. The weight loss is a result of you putting your body back into homeostasis, allowing all of your hormones to work properly again with themselves and find normal homeostasis, not the drug-induced homeostasis that's working at covering and masking this one symptom, but never getting to the root cause fire that's burning underneath. And just following up with her, she goes, you're right. And she lived with her brother, and so she didn't throw the stuff away. But I go, just donate it to a pantry. Go take it. Just get it out of the house. But then I also made the snide comment, but then you're just poisoning those people that you're donating it to.
True.
And that hit her too, because all these little things, but then all of a sudden within 2-3 weeks, and I have her sitting out, waking up in the morning, go sit outside in a lawn chair, put your bare feet in the grass, face east, get some sun on you, understanding all of the different ways that we can battle the insulin resistance. And I know it's going to help her just with her general pain on top of that. And if somebody would have told me that 7 years ago, I would have said, you're nuts.
Yep.
Just not understanding the thousands of research papers out there in all of this quantum and circadian biology worlds, completely separate from from the food aspect and focusing only on what we eat. So anyhow, within 5 weeks, we meet up about once a week for a quick little face-to-face. And so one of us will jump in the other one's car and we'll talk, or we'll go to a coffee place or whatever, and she goes, check this out. So I'm sitting next to her in her car, and she jumps out of her car and she's just kind of walks over to the sidewalk and she's looking at me and smiling. And I'm just like, because I hadn't seen her enough when she was damaged to notice the dramatic difference. And I go, so she jumps in the car. She goes, what do you think? And I'm like, well, you look incredibly happy. You look like you're just, great. She goes, Brett, do you realize how effortlessly I'm walking? For the last 3 days, have no pain anymore. So
Wow.
kind of like when I said I still had 90 pounds on me, but all the pain was gone and I had flipped the metabolism. She's now starting to move into that fat adapted native metabolism every baby again born with. Sorry to be repetitive. But it's just, and then that day, later that day is when I recorded my first episode with Dave on low carb life. And I tell that story. And just to see the pure joy in her face. Well, 2 weeks later, 2.5 weeks later, Dave and I do a second episode. And she had told me right before that, she goes, okay, I just need you to know, back when we met that day, I went off of my GLP-1. Now, I've always, and I will say this with every person I work with, I'm never going to tell you to stop using a medication. I'm going to heavily recommend that if you decide you want to address this with your doctor, reach out. There might be titration protocols that you should not. There are things you don't come off of like this. And but then she's just like, I've been off it for 2.5 weeks and I'm still losing weight. I don't have any hunger pains. All of this is just resolved. So
Man,
there's $1,000 a month prescription that she's off of.
amazing.
So again, where I'm coming back to where I said when I started this, and there's a guy that I recorded an episode on my podcast with last night, Jeff, and he started his journey. He wasn't on heavy duty meds, but he had a number of different issues. And some people can just walk their way into this and start changing things. But if you're on a heavy duty hypertensive or a heavy duty glucose medication, you're injecting insulin, there are guidelines, and there's other guidelines than what the doctors traditionally understand as guidelines, that then if I'm working with a client, I'm going to have them, or I'll share with their doctor, your patient, my client, is making a radical transformation. I don't say radical, is making an investment in her lifestyle. By doing this, her body's going to find homeostasis really quick and start healing. It could be incredibly important within days to a week to potentially, and again, depending upon the drug, different with every episode, there's nuance and context to everything. So some things I'm saying are directionally correct, but you have to zero in sometimes. So for sake of our conversation, you might have to titrate down 50%. If it's typically a blood pressure or a glucose thing, they might need to be down 50% right away, because they're going to start making and regulating all of this internally again.
Yep.
And I don't want somebody I'm working with to go hypotensive and hypoglycemic and pass out, fall downstairs, pass out while they're driving and kill other people and themselves. I mean, there's things that you have to be aware of with all of this. So again, there's nuance and context. If it's just another buddy of mine and I know they're not, on medications, but that's why, like when people are now reaching out to me, which is wonderful about this whole aspect of the world. I had 100 people reach out to me
Wow, great.
from Dave's stuff. Some of them just, Casey, I'm sure you get some of this too. There are angels in this world. They've already solved their stuff, but they follow the channels because they love the stories. They saw me on Dave's and they're just like, Brett, I'm retired. I love what you're doing. Can I volunteer? How can I help? I can answer phones. I can do research. I can write. And I've had 5 people reach out to me with these kinds of propositions. Where does that come from? Now, yeah, I've gotten a number of new clients too, and that's wonderful and great. And I give away my first hour I got to get to know them. They'll have other questions they want, and it could be an hour or two, and I don't care how long it is. And then if they want to go down the action plan of here's what we can do, they can buy a 4 hour block and we'll go tackle things and work on things. And but oh my God, how many businesses have people just reaching out from all over the world asking to volunteer?
Yeah.
I don't like to think of myself as a business, I'm a one-man coaching band, but I got other people that want to come on and coach too. And I go, let me build the base, and I'm happy to bring you on board and do all of this. So some people say, well, your website says contact us. It's just you. I go, well, there's a couple other things going on behind the scenes that I just haven't told everybody about yet. Anyhow, so maybe that's a bow on that question or not. And I know we're probably closing in on your time constraints.
Well, to answer your question, like what businesses have people just reaching out to volunteer? It's like really special ones to change lives. You know what I mean? I reflect on you and your story in your life and, where you were with your own journey and discovering this information. It is very special and it becomes obsessive. And I know very few people who don't learn about this stuff and then don't want to turn around and share it. Like it's not enough to hold it for ourselves. We want to get it out there. And that's what I see in you that I think is so special, and that desire to get it out there. And just before we got on this recording, you were asking, what my opinion was on starting 3 different kind of YouTube channels, if that was the best way to have stories and also the science behind things, and like that you would go through that work of even thinking about starting multiple channels. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know about the topic.
Well, and everybody can do something with it. I mean, because of, I've done 2000, whether it's Zoom way back in the day, GoToMeeting, and every iteration of being able to video conference and teleconference with people through my whole sales career. And I'm not shy, and I don't care if somebody doesn't buy into it right now. I'll just plant seeds and let them grow and come back. But so a lot of people look and say, well, Brett, I can't do what you're doing because I don't have your background. I don't have your skills. I go, you have the singular most important ingredient. What this do for you? Tell your story. Share it. Come on mine, go on Dave's, go on yours. Share the story. Tell people. And we might have some tools that we can help you drop on people, because nobody wants to listen to their friends and family, because we discount that 100% totally. It's just that's an abyss that takes a long time and a lot of planting of seeds till they start coming back and say, Jesus, 6 years later, and you're not 115 pounds heavier. Now I did put on 25 pounds of muscle because I got into lifting and everything.
Awesome.
But I still have excess skin that I don't know if I'll have forever or not. I've got protocols I'm trying to work on with all of that. Who knows? It might just be a constant reminder I have to live with in the mirror for the rest of my life. And if so, that's okay. It is what it is. But yeah, I mean, I went from double XLs down to Ls. Now I'm back in XLs because I have a chest and a back that I've never
Nice.
had before. And I go like this instead of going like this. So, anyhow.
Yeah. Well, Brett, that's amazing. Like I said, I think your story is very, very special. I love your desire and drive to share that with others. And I just am really grateful for you and everything you've been through and the willingness to come on our show today to tell your story. And I think that advice for the listener is so wonderful to get out there and in whatever way you possibly can to get out and make sure you are sharing your story. So, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work, Brett?
Well, I have a website, and that also lists my podcast channels and even appearances that I'm on other people's podcasts, so that they can find all the different. Not, once somebody hears me for 30 minutes, they're probably done. They don't need to keep hearing me. But so I'm at mymetaboliclife.com. I am also at My Metabolic Life on YouTube, so at My Metabolic Life and at the Mitochondriacs. But if they just go to my website, they can click without having to try to type all that in and make sure they did it all correctly, and just go to the channels. I hope they like and subscribe. They can contact me on my website, my phone, and they can just hit contact me for an email. They can follow my Facebook page, which is also My Metabolic Life. So all different things out there trying to be, and yes, now I have to deal with all the social media, and probably will do an Instagram at some point in time. Who knows? I all in time. We'll figure it out.
These are the links we go to share this message. Not our favorite places to go, but that's where people are. And if you want to share, that's what you have to do. So, anyway, Brett,
Sometimes I just have to wear those blue light blocking glasses while I'm
there you
doing it.
go. Yep, exactly. There you go. Oh, man. Well, thanks again for coming on the show today. We really appreciate you. And thank you for sharing your story today. It was fantastic.
Casey, so much appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.